The carpet in the tactical briefing room at Naval Air Station Fallon smelled like 20 years of stale coffee and nervous sweat. I knew the smell well because my face was currently about 6 inches away from the floor fibers. I was on my hands and knees under the main conference table, wrestling with a stubborn HDMI cable that had decided to die 10 minutes before the biggest briefing of the year. To anyone walking in, I looked exactly like what my badge said I was. Just a civilian contractor, just the IT support, just the help. The heavy double doors at the back of the room swung open. The sound of laughter and heavy boots filled the air. It was the distinct, arrogant swagger of fighter pilots who had never been told no in their lives. I didn't need to look up to know who was leading the pack. I could recognize that voice anywhere. It was a voice that had tormented me at every family Thanksgiving for the last 15 years. Lieutenant Brad Hammer Vance walked in like he owned the building. He was my stepbrother, the golden child my stepfather had brought into our family when our parents married. Brad was the perfect Navy specimen, tall, square-jawed, and wearing a flight suit that fit him a little too perfectly. He was loud, brash, and currently laughing at a joke about a rookie mechanic he had just dressed down on the tarmac. I kept my head down, hoping the shadow of the table would hide me. I just needed 30 more seconds to secure the connection and slip out the side door. But luck has never been a close friend of mine. I felt a boot nudge my hip. It wasn't a gentle tap. It was a kick, dismissive and rude. "Hey, sweetheart," Brad's voice boomed from above me. "You mind hurrying it up down there? Real work is about to happen in here." His squadron buddies chuckled. It was that low, wolfish laughter that made your skin crawl. I grit my teeth and gave the cable one final shove into the port. I dusted off my knees and crawled out from under the mahogany table. I stood up, smoothing down my simple gray slacks and black polo shirt. My hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and I wasn't wearing a lick of makeup. To them, I was invisible. "The connection is stable," I said, keeping my voice flat. "System is ready for the brief." Brad squinted at me, his eyes narrowing as he processed my face. The recognition hit him like a physical slap. His smirk didn't vanish, but it twisted into something uglier, something personal. "Well, I'll be damned," he laughed, looking around at his wingmen. "Boys, look who it is. It's my little sister, Sarah. I told you she worked on base. I just didn't realize she was still crawling around on the floor for a living." The other pilots laughed harder this time. One of them, a guy with the call sign Viper, leaned back in his chair. He looked me up and down with open disdain. "This is the sister you told us about?" Viper asked. "The one who washed out?" "That's her," Brad said, leaning his hip against the table. "Sarah barely made it through basic training before she realized she wasn't cut out for the big leagues. Daddy got her a job fixing computers so she wouldn't starve. Isn't that right, Sarah?" I stared at him. The lie was so bold, so practiced. He had told them I washed out. He had told them I was a failure. It was the same narrative he spun at every family gathering, while my stepfather nodded in agreement. They loved to talk about Brad the hero, the aviator, the tip of the spear. Sarah was just the background noise. Sarah was disappointed. "I'm just doing my job, Lieutenant," I said quietly. "You should probably take your seat. The admiral is on his way." Brad snorted. "Don't tell me what to do, tech girl. You fix the slides. You get the coffee. Leave the flying to the adults." He waved his hand toward the door. "Now go wait outside. This room is classified. Real pilots only." "Yeah, beat it, sweetheart," Viper added. "Go reset a router or something." I felt the heat rising in my cheeks. It wasn't embarrassment. It was rage. a cold, hard knot of anger that had been sitting in my gut since I was 16 years old. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him exactly why he was wrong. But I didn't. In my line of work, you don't win by shouting, you win by waiting. Is there a problem here? The voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a razor blade. The silence that followed was instant and absolute. Standing in the doorway was Admiral Blackwood, the commander of the Naval Strike and Air Warfare Center. He was a legend in the aviation community, a man who had seen more combat than this entire room combined. "Room 10 Hut," Brad barked. The pilots scrambled to their feet. Chairs scraped loudly against the floor. They stood at rigid attention, chests out, chins up. Brad was the picture of military perfection. He stared straight ahead, desperate to impress the man who held his career in his hands. Admiral Blackwood walked slowly into the room. He didn't look at the pilots. He didn't look at the impressive graphics on the screen. He walked straight past the front row. He walked right past Brad, who was practically vibrating with the need to be noticed. The Admiral stopped in front of me. The silence stretched out. It was heavy and awkward. Brad's eyes darted sideways, confused. He was waiting for the Admiral to yell at me. He was waiting for the order to have the civilian support staff removed from the secure area. Instead, Admiral Blackwood reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a silver laser pointer and a heavy, encrypted USB drive. He held them out to me. "Good morning, Sarah," the Admiral said, his voice warm and respectful. "I believe the floor is yours." Brad made a noise. It was a strangled little squeak, like a dog that had been kicked. He blinked rapidly, his brain unable to process the data. The Admiral, a 3-star flag officer, was handing control of the briefing to the IT girl. "Thank you, Admiral," I said. I took the clicker. My hand was steady. "I'll be observing from the back," Blackwood said. He turned to the room, his face hardening into stone. "Gentlemen, take your seats, and God help you if you don't listen to every word this woman says." The Admiral marched to the back of the room and sat in the shadows. The pilots sat down slowly, confusion written all over their faces. Brad slumped into his chair in the front row. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and bewilderment. He mouthed the word, "What?" I walked to the podium. I didn't look like a commander. I was still wearing my civilian clothes. I still looked like the help. But when I plugged that drive in and the first slide hit the screen, the atmosphere changed. The title slide didn't say technical support. It read, Operation Gauntlet, Aggressor Squadron Tactical Overview, Classification, Top Secret. And right underneath that, in bold white letters, Briefing Officer, Commander Sarah Ghost Vance, Chief Tactical Architect. I heard a gasp from the second row. I looked directly at Brad. His face had drained of all color. He looked like he was going to be sick. He read the rank again. Commander. I wasn't just an officer. I outranked him. I outranked everyone in his squadron. "Good morning, lieutenants," I said. My voice was amplified by the microphone, filling every corner of the room. "My name is Commander Vance. Most of you think you're here for a standard red flag exercise. You think you're going to fly against some scripted drones and go home to drink beer at the O Club." I paused, letting the words hang there. "You are wrong," I continued. "I am the commander of the 13th Aggressor Squadron. My job is not to train you. My job is to expose you. I study your flight patterns. I study your psychology. I find the gaps in your ego, and I put a missile through them." I clicked to the next slide. It was a dossier, Brad's dossier. His photo was blown up on the 20-foot screen. Beside it were graphs and charts analyzing his last 50 flight hours. Lieutenant Vance, I said, saying his name like it was a dirty word. Call sign, Hammer, aggressive, talented, but prone to target fixation. You have a habit of abandoning your wingman to chase the glory kill. You think you're flying an F-18, but you fly like you're in a video game. Brad opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. This is not a debate, Lieutenant, I snapped. This is a briefing. You called me tech support. You told me to leave the room. Well, I'm the one who designed the simulation you are about to fly. I wrote the code that controls the enemies you will face, and for the next 3 hours you don't belong to the Navy. You belong to me. I spent the next 40 minutes dissecting their tactics. I tore apart their formations. I humiliated them with math and physics. I showed them exactly how a cheaper, older MiG could shoot down their expensive Super Hornets if the pilot was arrogant. I knew their playbook better than they did. Brad sat there in silence. He was sweating. I could see the damp patches forming on his flight suit. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at his hands. He was realizing that the sister he had mocked for a decade, the failure he had laughed at, had actually been running the most elite opposition force in the Navy. Briefing dismissed, I said, closing the laptop. Report to the simulators. It's time to see if you can fly as well as you talk. The simulator room was cold and dark. It was lined with rows of high-fidelity cockpits, each one a perfect replica of an F-18 Super Hornet. The pilots climbed in, their swagger gone. They were nervous now. They knew they were being watched. I didn't climb into a cockpit. I went to the control center. It was a raised platform surrounded by monitors. This was my domain. From here, I could control the weather, the enemy, the malfunctions, and the chaos. I put on my headset. "Com check," I said. "All stations report. Hammer 1, ready?" Brad's voice came through the headset. He sounded shaky. "Viper 2, ready." "Copy," I said. "Fight's on." The simulation began. I spawned them 20,000 feet over a digital desert. The mission was simple. Escort a high-value transport through enemy airspace. Standard stuff. Easy stuff. Or at least it should have been. But I wasn't going to make it easy. I typed a command into my console. Initiate protocol. Blue Falcon. On their radar screens, 4 enemy bandits appeared. They were jamming the frequencies, creating ghost targets. Confusion erupted on the radio. "Contact! I've got 4 contacts!" Brad yelled. "Engaging!" "Negative, Hammer!" his wingman shouted. "Stick to the transport. They're trying to draw you off." This was the test. A disciplined pilot stays with the mission. An arrogant pilot chases the kill. I watched the telemetry on my screen. I watched Brad's plane bank hard to the left. He was taking the bait. He was leaving the transport defenseless to chase a phantom. "Hammer, return to formation," Viper screamed. "I've got him. I've got the lock," Brad yelled back. "Fox 2." He fired a missile. It tracked the target and exploded. Brad cheered. "Splash 1, who's the man?" "Check your 6, Hammer," I whispered into the microphone. I spawned 2 more bandits directly behind him. These weren't dumb AI drones. These were Ghost-class adversaries. They were programmed with my own flight data. They were aggressive, precise, and lethal. The radar warning receiver in Brad's cockpit started screaming. The tone was a continuous, high-pitched wail. He panicked. I could see his control inputs on my screen. He yanked the stick back, trying to pull a high G maneuver to shake the lock. It was a rookie move. He bled all his energy. He was slow, heavy, and hanging in the sky like a piñata. "Bandit has tone," I said calmly. "Fox 2. My digital counterpart fired. The missile slammed into Brad's virtual engine. His cockpit went red. Alarms blared, engine fire, hydraulics failure. "I'm hit! I'm hit!" Brad screamed. Ejecting! No, I said. Override ejection. I locked him in the box. I wanted him to ride it down. I wanted him to see the ground rushing up at him. I wanted him to feel the failure. Transport is under attack, Viper shouted. We have no cover. Hammer left us. Transport destroyed, I announced. Mission failure. All assets lost. The screens went black. The words, simulation terminated, flashed in red letters across every monitor in the room. Silence. I took off my headset and walked down the steps from the control platform. The canopies of the simulators hissed open. The pilots climbed out. They looked exhausted. They looked defeated. Brad climbed out of his cockpit slowly. He looked like he had just gone 10 rounds with a prizefighter. He wiped sweat from his forehead and looked up at me. I was standing there, arms crossed, still in my civilian clothes. You cheated, Brad said. His voice was breathless, desperate. That wasn't real. You spawned enemies out of nowhere. I exploited a tactical error, I corrected him. You left your wingman. You chased a shiny object because you wanted to be the hero. And because of that, you died. And your transport died. And your wingman died. I walked closer to him. The other pilots backed away, giving us space. You called me a base rat, I said softly, so only he could hear. You told your friends I washed out. Do you want to know the truth, Brad? He didn't answer. He just stared at me, his jaw working. I didn't wash out, I said. I was recruited. Admiral Blackwood pulled me from flight school 3 weeks before graduation. He saw my test scores. He saw that I could process tactical data faster than anyone in my class. He asked me to join the aggressor program, to become the enemy, to teach pilots like you humility. I took a step closer. I have been flying against the best pilots in the world for 5 years, I said. I have logged more simulated kills than you have flight hours. I wear civilian clothes because I don't need a uniform to know who I am. I don't need a patch on my shoulder to prove my worth. Brad looked down. For the first time in his life, he looked small. The arrogance was gone. The swagger was gone. All that was left was a man who had been thoroughly, completely dismantled. You're dangerous, Lieutenant, I said, raising my voice so the whole room could hear. You are a liability, and as the commander of this exercise, I am grounding you. Brad's head snapped up. You can't do that. I just did, I said. Your flight status is revoked pending a full review of your tactical decision-making. You will not fly in my sky until you learn that being a pilot isn't about the cool jacket and the sunglasses. It's about the mission. Admiral Blackwood stepped out of the shadows at the back of the room. He walked toward us, his face unreadable. He stopped next to me. Admiral, Brad stammered. Sir, surely you don't agree with this. It was just a simulation. It was a test, Lieutenant, Blackwood said coldly. And you failed. Commander Vance has full authority over this exercise. If she says you're grounded, you're grounded. The Admiral turned to me and gave a sharp, crisp salute. Excellent work, Commander, he said. I returned the salute. Thank you, sir. Brad watched the exchange. He watched the Admiral salute the stepsister he had mocked. He watched the tech girl dismiss him. The reality of it finally sank in. I turned my back on him. I walked over to the console and started unplugging my laptop. I coiled the HDMI cable, the same one I had been fixing under the table, and placed it neatly on the desk. Oh, and Brad? I called out without looking back. He flinched. Next time you see someone fixing a cable or sweeping a floor, I said, show a little respect. You never know who they might be. I walked out of the simulator room. The heavy doors clicked shut behind me. I walked down the long, sterile hallway of the base. For the first time in years, The knot of anger in my stomach was gone. I felt light. I felt clean. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my stepfather, probably asking how Brad's big day went, probably expecting a story about his son's triumph. I didn't answer it. I didn't delete it. I just put the phone back in my pocket. I had work to do. There were 100 other arrogant pilots coming through next week, and I had a whole new set of nightmares to design for them. I walked out into the bright Nevada sunlight. The sound of jet engines roared overhead. I looked up and watched 2 F-18s banking hard against the blue sky. They looked powerful. They looked invincible. But I knew better. I knew their weaknesses. I knew their fears. I was the ghost in the machine, and I was just getting started.